We're going to go ahead and get started. Wow, welcome to week 3. Today, I'm in a lot of places in this church during first service, but we are going to have an awesome time just talking about sticky faith conversations. There will be a time I'm going to have to slip out during the video. We are having a leader meeting with all of our elementary leaders during service, so I will be just sneaking out for a little bit to take care of that. And Jamie will be up here, and he'll make sure that after the video, if I'm not back, we're just going to go through and discuss the video again. This is a big week. Like, as I was looking and preparing for this, a lot of this stuff that we're going to be talking about today really hit home for me. And I think it's going to be good. It's sticky faith conversations, which may be a little scary to some, okay? So just a recap real quick. Like, anybody's first week this week? First week, hello. Anybody's second week so far? Second week, like you're here first week last week. Excellent. And then 3 weeks now. Come on, you perfect attenders. Awesome job. You guys get stickers at the end and a pat on the back from me, all right, which means a lot. All right, so, yeah, we're doing this thing called Sticky Faith, and we're going to be going through 5 different things on sticky faith. So far, we talked about the first week was Sticky Faith Essential, so, like, what is sticky faith? Last week, we talked about sticky faith identity, which is that question, who am I? Your kids are asking, maybe who you're asking, who are you? And then, like I said, this week, we're talking about sticky faith conversations. Real quick, how many of you guys would say that you are really good at having conversations with your spouse? Just raise your hand, or a good friend. How many of you guys would say you're pretty good? Now, your wife's probably like, really? Really? All right. How many of you guys would say you're pretty good at having conversations with your children? Raise your hand. Whether they're little, I mean, you could still talk to your children when they're little, right? You can still, okay. Let's go a little deeper. How many of you guys feel like you're consistent in talking to your kids about their faith? Yeah. Here's what I want to say. There's a study that's in the book, and out of 11,000 teenagers, okay, like I said, all this is based on research. Everything that we're teaching on is based on research. 11,000 teenagers from 560 churches, 12% of kids said that they have regular conversations with their moms about their faith. All right, 12% out of 11,000, right? That's not very many. For dads, it's only 5%. Not like a kid going to the parents. No, it's moms leading the conversation or dads leading the conversations. It's 12% for moms and 5% for dads. And here's another thing with this study. It says 9% of teenagers engage in regular reading of God's word with their parents, which basically means, like, you may be reading something together, or they may be reading something together, or you may be reading something separately, but the conversation that's happening about God's word, only 9% of that dialogue is happening with our kids. And so Kara, she's going to be teaching on this crucial subject today about having conversations. And then it's not just faith conversations, which is probably the most important. It's going to be just regular day conversations. You're going to hear some different things. I'm going to challenge you like I do every week. You have notes on there. There's a lot of good stuff on this video today. So really tread through, take some notes, write down things that stick out to you. Some things go really quick. She put some things on the screen that goes way fast. So you're going to have quick hands today, or at least have good memory when you write it down. But at the end, we're going to come back up here. Either myself or Jamie will be up here, and I'm going to say, hey, what are some things that you guys grasped from the video? And then we're going to hit the 2 intentional parenting things like we do every week. We got a couple more weeks of that from Doug Fields and his wife, Kathy, from that book I've been also teaching out of. And it blows me away. Like, you would think that I was really prepared for this class. Like, I'm like, oh, these resources really they go hand in hand every single week. And that's just God. Like, I just believe this is where God has laid on our hearts, and the way that he's put both of these resources in our hands, and the way that they just work together so well. So these 2 things I'm going to be talking about today goes exactly with what the Sticky Faith Conversations is all about. So with that, I'm going to pray, and then we'll go in this video, and then we'll get started. Lord, thank you so much for this day. God, thank you for your promises and the way that you are just so good to us, that you are a good father. I pray that you will just help us as parents, Lord, be better for them. I pray, Lord, as we go through these conversations, that you give us the boldness and the words, the patience, the wisdom, Lord, as you just direct us, God. And I know some of our kids are very young, and maybe some parents are thinking, man, this stuff is later in their life. But God, I pray that we can put some of this stuff in practice today. And I pray, Lord, that for those who think their kids are too old for some of this, that's too late, Lord, I pray that you just give them hope. And Lord, that they can put some of this stuff in practice today. It's not too late. And so, God, I pray that you just teach us and direct us. We love you. We pray also in your name. Amen. All right, we're going to check this out, and I'll be back afterwards.
Imagine we planted a microphone in your house or your car, maybe your minivan, and we recorded your family's conversations. What would be the number one topic of conversation? If you're like most families, it would be logistics. Like your daughter wondering when you can take her to the art store, or your son wondering when his friend can come over and play basketball. Let me ask you this. What % of your conversations with your kids would mention God or your faith? What's your answer? Now let me ask you another question. How do you feel about your answer? If you're like most parents, you wish that you talked more about your faith with your kids. You know, it seems like there are two extremes for us in our faith discussions. On the one hand are those who clam up when it comes to talking about matters of faith. And on the other hand are those parents who gush, maybe to the point of annoying our sons and our daughters. How can we find that authentic middle ground of real, organic conversations about faith? When I'm talking to parents about sticky faith discussions, often someone will mention, well, I believe in living out my faith more than talking about my faith. As we already said in session 1, who you are has far more influence on your kid than almost anything else. If I had to choose between living out my faith and talking about my faith, I would choose living out my faith. But the good news is I don't have to make that choice, and neither do you. We can do both. Actions speak louder than words, but words are still so very important. So we're not going to plant a microphone in your house or in your car, in your minivan, but we do want this session to help you think about how can you have words and conversations that build sticky faith. Those parents who do try to talk with their kids about faith tend to default to asking their kids questions. The parent ends up basically interviewing their son or daughter. They might ask, what did you talk about in church today? Or how was youth group? Or maybe, what did you think of the sermon? Depending on the personality and mood of your kid, responses usually range from grunts to the usual. That's not very satisfying for you or for your kid. When it comes to sticky faith, asking these questions can pay off, but as vital is that you also share about your own faith. In other words, don't just interview your kids, discuss your own faith journey and all of its ups and downs also. And that includes talking about tricky subjects, like sex. 2 different studies indicate that the more important religion is to parents, the more difficult it is for those same parents to talk with their kids about sex. I find that incredibly ironic. We as followers of Christ should be at the front of the line to talk with our kids about sex. After all, we know that sex, when done right, is a fantastic gift from God. Another tough topic to discuss with our kids is doubt. We tend to assume that doubting our faith is wrong or even sinful, so we never talk about doubts with our kids. But at least in our study, students who felt the freedom and had opportunities to express their doubts tended to have more sticky faith. Doubt in and of itself isn't toxic. It's only when adults and kids don't express our doubts in a safe, loving environment that those doubts become toxic. No matter what the topic is, a good faith conversation doesn't equal convincing your kid that what you believe is best. This probably doesn't surprise you, but your children don't want you to try to convince them to agree with you. Not only don't they want it, they might reject you and your faith when you try. Building sticky faith means that we use any springboard available to dive into deeper conversations. A year ago, I met Eileen, a mother of 2 teenagers. Eileen connects with her son and daughter by staying nearby when her kids have the TV on. If her kids are watching TV without her, she usually works in her nearby home office. She keeps an ear tuned to words or phrases drifting from the TV room. When Eileen overhears a commercial or scene with sexual overtones, she'll ask questions like, "What do you think that ad was trying to say?" Or, "Why do you think they are using women in bikinis to sell hamburgers?" If her kids are watching a TV show with her, she's the one holding the remote. During or after scenes that show something sexual or related to drugs or alcohol or anything controversial, Eileen hits the pause button. She asks her kids questions and then often shares her own thoughts. In her efforts to build sticky faith, Eileen has found that TV can be a great conversation starter on all sorts of topics. She takes advantage of shows like The Apprentice and The Amazing Race to talk with her kids about ethics and character. She'll ask her kids, what should that person have done? I asked Eileen if her kids ever roll their eyes at her questions and commentary. She told me, sure, at times they do, but sometimes we get into good conversations, and every once in a while, they later parrot back to me something I've said. Like all parenting, I'm planting seeds. The effort, time, and thought we pour into conversations with our kids doesn't end when they graduate from high school. Recently, I spoke with Rowena, whose college freshman son lives on campus at a university 30 minutes from their house. When Rowena calls his cell phone, he's often headed into class or on his way to lunch, so he never seems to have much time to talk. His occasional moodiness doesn't help. But he does need regular haircuts. He likes the barber who cut his hair through high school, but he doesn't have a car at school to drive himself back home. So this busy mom makes the effort every month to pick up her son at school, take him for a haircut, and then drive him back. At first, her husband objected. "This is silly. He's a college student. He can get his own haircut." But then Rowena explained that it wasn't about the haircut. It was about the 30-minute car rides to and from the barber that they had together, just the two of them. During those car rides, she gets the best glimpse of how her son is doing. For example, once he happened to mention that he had started attending a campus Bible study. He never would have mentioned that during their short phone calls, but the 30-minute car ride gives her son time to unpack his life. As parents, it's up to us to seize every opportunity possible to have honest conversations with our kids.
My parents did a really good job of describing why they did their actions. So what they did, they said they held themselves accountable to God's standard in everything they did. So for instance, when they read the Bible, they said, it's important that I read the Bible because God calls us to stay near His Word. And this is something we need to do every day to stay connected, because the world is a place that doesn't have that. It's just not naturally connected with God, especially in our culture today. So they said, every morning, every day, you gotta have that time, the quiet time where you're by yourself, reading the Bible, praying, so it keeps you grounded and keeps you focused on that. So they said that's the reason why we do that, because we need to just stay focused on God and what He has for our life. The reason why I wanted to follow in my parents' footsteps was because it wasn't my parents' footsteps that I was following. It was the steps that I was following was God's footsteps. And so they always pointed me towards God. And so I wasn't following, all right, I'm gonna follow what my parents do. What do my parents do? How do my parents live? It's how does God call me to live? And so that's what, I think one thing that stuck with me. I went from home where it's like all nice, you're safe. Then you go to high school, you go to college, you're removed from that. So what standard do you live by? I don't really live by my parents' standard or how they've lived, because it's my life. So I gotta call myself, they've called me, hey, live according to God, it's God's standard. And I've sort of developed my own faith to the point where I wanna follow God in what I do. I would love to be the parents that my parents are to me. I think it's just because, not because there's some amazing, great people, wow, they're just superstars. Just because their daily living, it's a very consistent faith to where they're constantly pointing me towards God. If I could be that to my kids, I don't want them to be like, hey, follow my example, guys, because my kids aren't gonna be me, and I'm not my parents. And so if I could be my parents' example, just pointing me, just look towards God to everything you do, and just have a consistent faith that my kids will be able to see in me, that my value, my worth, my joy, my peace, all those things isn't found in stuff my job or my career or my friends or whatever. It's just found in God. And so if my parents could, or my kids could see that in me, that'll be everything. That's what I want.
Throughout our Sticky Faith research, parents have repeatedly told us that their best conversations with their kids occur in the midst of everyday life. When they are in the minivan talking together about hockey practice, or when their kid is stressed over finding a prom date. Those times of crisis or debriefing of the day's events are often the best springboards for deeper conversation. While the timing of those conversations is based more on your kid's mood than anything else, you'll interact better with your son or daughter when you learn to listen and ask questions instead of lecture. Let's be honest, parents lecturing kids hasn't worked. Dallas Willard, who coined the phrase, the gospel of sin management, that we mentioned in the first session, writes in the same book this quote, "But now let us try a subversive thought. Suppose our failures occur not in spite of what we are doing, but precisely because of it." Maybe one of the main reasons we struggle to communicate with our kids is that we are lecturing them. One of the best pieces of Sticky Faith communication advice we can share is this: never explain something to your kid if you can ask a question instead. Why is this so important? Picture you and your child talking about premarital sex. Does your child know what you think about it? Does your child know what you would want to say to them about it? Odds are good that the answer to both questions is yes. Because your child already knows what you think and knows what you're going to say, they will likely close their mind as soon as you open your mouth. One noted psychologist who's also a dad recently told me the story of talking to his 16-year-old about a behavior that the dad felt should change. After the dad's long and well-reasoned list of reasons the son should change, the son shrugged and said, "Are you done yet?" Note that the question was, "Are you done yet?" not "Are we done yet?" During the course of our meetings with parents nationwide, our team has been so impressed with their creativity in asking questions and creating space for meaningful conversation. We've noticed that when children are younger, scheduled dates are often quite effective. Your kids will look forward to knowing when they get to go miniature golfing or on a hike with you. As your kids get older, maybe around middle school, scheduled dates might seem less sincere. Your child might not appreciate it seeming like you had to schedule time with them to make it happen. Even if you do actually plan it ahead and enter it into your calendar, you might not want them to know that. As your son or daughter enters adolescence, what we call planned spontaneity is often more effective. And we hope that planned spontaneity happens with both parents. That way your son remains connected to his mom or stepmom, and your daughter gets quality time with her dad or stepdad. And remember, in our conversations, we need to share about our own faith journey. When you do share your experiences, please make sure you don't cross the line into parental lecturing. Lots of parents miss that line, and believe me, your kids' alarm bells will go off when you cross it.
Through thick or thin or whatever, we're better together as a family unit, communicating and talking to one another. We're better together through talking because, again, we get a chance to exchange ideas. We want open and honest communication with one another. And so we started something very early on with the kids. I mean, they were barely talking, and we said, hey, be honest with us. Let's talk about your feelings. Let's talk together. My daughter really took it to heart because she's in acting right now, and she's talking all the time. But she not only talks, she writes, and she expresses herself. And I think that's one of the things we said, if you can't talk, then use your other skills. And her skill was writing, my son's skill was touch. But when we get together, the thing that we do is to talk so that we can communicate with one another. One of the things too that we did when they grew up and got older, I think my daughter was about 8 or 9 years old, we talked to her and my son and said, you know what? You're gonna go through life, and life's a journey. And on this journey, there are gonna be times where you're gonna encounter trouble. And when you encounter trouble, you're gonna have to decide at that point, do I tell the truth or do I tell a lie? We try to relate it biblically to them in terms of, hey, does God want you to lie and tell the truth and things? I said, so let me explain something that happened to me when I was a kid. I said, there were times where I didn't want to get in trouble and I didn't tell the truth. Hey, I may have gotten away with it, but I didn't feel good about it. So I said, we want you guys to feel good about yourself. So if you go through life and you encounter these problems, I can guarantee you this with us, that if you tell us the truth, you may get in trouble some of the time, but if you tell a lie and we find out about it, you're going to get in trouble all the time. Some of the biggest issues that I faced in life, and I went to my friends, they gave me the worst advice possible. And I said, you know, I wish I hadn't listened to them. So going back and raising kids, I said, how can I relate this to my kids so that they don't make the same type of mistakes? Not that they're going to make mistakes, everybody does, but how do they keep from having those type of mistakes? And I said, I want to make sure I tell them one thing, that if you encounter these troubles, then the worst people to go to are your friends, because usually they know less than you do. The other part is that they don't always have your best interests at heart. So the thing that you want to do is that if you encounter something like that, come talk to me, your mom, talk to your brother or sister, your grandparents, a trusted advisor, an adult, a Sunday school teacher, somebody like that. So that's one thing that they've taken to heart, and to this day they still do that. They come to us and talk to us. And again, not always that they can come to us, but during those times where they can't, they come to us and say, I want to go talk to somebody else about this. And we're comfortable with that. An analogy we like to use in our household is this. Said, I know that fire burns. I know it burns because I put my hand in it. And my job, or our jobs as parents, is to tell you that, hey, if you put your hand in fire, it's going to get burned. Now you can test it and you're going to get burned, but hey, I can tell you that it burns, and here's a scar to prove that it burns. So they take that to heed a lot.
During our Sticky Faith project, I've realized so many errors I've made as a parent. Take our family devotions. We try to have family devotions most every weekend. At least in this season, when our kids are in elementary school, family devotions give us a set time every week to focus on God together. Lest you be under any illusions, they usually last less than 6 minutes. And they might not happen if it's an extra busy weekend or if one of my 2 favorite football teams are playing. Who are my 2 favorite teams? Well, I'm from San Diego, so my 2 favorite teams are the Chargers and whoever is playing the Raiders. Since our family tends to do our devotions on Sundays, before our research, we used to ask our kids one at a time what they had learned in church that day. Then we'd read and discuss a scripture story, share prayer requests, and pray for each other. Where did we go wrong? Dave and I never shared with our kids what we had learned in church. We were interviewing our kids instead of having a conversation with them. Thanks to our research, now when we ask our kids to share what they learned in church, we talk about what we learned or experienced too. On nights our family has dinner together, we have a tradition of sharing our highs and lows of the day. Because of what we've learned about Sticky Faith, we've added a 3rd question. How did you see God at work today? The first time we added that question to our conversation, our then 7-year-old said quickly, "But I can't answer that question." "Why not?" I asked. She answered, "Because I don't have a job." Once we explained that we meant, how did you see God working today, she realized she could be part of the discussion. Often our kids don't have an answer to that question, and that's okay. In fact, equally as important as the kids answering that question is that they hear Dave and me answer that question every day. And don't forget to talk about how God has led you in the past. I recently talked with one youth pastor who asked 20 of his students on a short-term mission trip if they knew how their parents became Christians. Care to guess how many knew their parents' faith stories? 0. Maybe one of the first Sticky Faith steps you need to take is to share with your kids how you became a Christian, or one thing you're praying about, or a scripture passage that is meaningful to you right now. When I share with parents the importance of having good conversations with their kids, often one of them will sheepishly raise their hand and ask, "What do you do if your kid doesn't want to talk to you?" Every teenager goes through seasons when they don't want to talk to their parents. What varies is the length and intensity of the season. The longer and more intense the season, the more creative we need to be as parents. One mom desperately wanted to have meaningful conversations with her 16-year-old, but he was uninterested. The last thing he wanted to do was spend time talking with her. But he did love movies. So this proactive mom began scanning movie trailers. She looked for movies that would be the most interesting to see with her son and hopefully talk with him about afterwards. When those movies hit the theaters, she offered to take her son. He almost always accepted, and they had their best conversations about life and faith on the drive home. This mom is no big fan of movies, but she's a fan of her son, and she's trying to build sticky faith. Plus, we can't assume that just because our kids say they don't want to talk to us, they really mean it. I'll never forget the story I heard of Jin, a pretty rough 17-year-old whose single dad sent her to a Christian school in hopes that it would straighten her out. Whether it was because her friends were going or because she warmed up to the faith, Jin signed up for the school's spring break mission trip to Guatemala. Jin ended up sitting on the flight next to Joe, the school's campus pastor. For the first few hours, Jin was her normal, tough self. She put on her earphones and mostly ignored Joe. He tried to ask her questions about her family. Jin summarized her relationship with her dad by saying, "I asked him to leave me alone, and he has." Throughout the mission trip, the Lord worked in Jin, and she softened. By the end of the trip, she confessed to Joe through her tears, "I wish my dad had not done what I asked. I wish he hadn't left me alone." Jin, believe me, so do I. Jin's stories, as well as those of countless teenagers and families we've encountered over these last 6 years, are motivating me to talk more to my kids about life and faith. I hope that this week you take a few extra minutes here and there to look your child in the eyes and ask a better question or share a bit more about yourself. We're seeing that sticky faith families are those in which kids and parents share their life and faith journeys with each other.
How long have we been going? Sweet. Good. I didn't want to miss it all. Sorry, Eric, I missed you. Yeah. Yeah, and that could be scary, especially when that Viagra commercial comes on, right? Sorry, just breaking the ice there. But really, that was the first thing I thought of. But I mean, usually that stuff's not on until later. That your kids shouldn't be watching those types of the TV at that time anyway. I mean, TV's pretty good at guarding what commercials, but it is, and even Cartoon Network. I've noticed. I don't even watch Cartoon Network anymore, or I don't let my daughter anyway. Especially because it gets like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. It's like this isn't Cartoon Network anymore. Anyway, but yeah, that was a good point. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. You first. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That was one of the things that got me is to not lecture, but how can you ask questions and still get the point? Because once we lecture, I mean, at least I know as a 10-year-old with my daughter, she just turns off. But if I ask her a question, I get her to think about it, then there's more conversation that actually happens. So I just got to be more intentional and thinking about that. Are you going to say something, Denny? Hmm. Yeah, I'm really good at telling you guys as parents, the first thing you should do is to ask your child what they learn, right? I needed that reminder. I remember hearing that, and it totally slipped out of my mind. I don't do that with Morgan for sure. Um, I always tell her, hey, what did you learn? I always ask her at lunch or after church on the way to lunch. I just lost my thing, but yeah, I don't tell her what we learned. That's so important for that conversation to happen, so she knows that you are experiencing Jesus too, that you are being challenged by His Word as well, and so that's great. Yeah, Crystal. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this one just really took me on every part. Like as you guys are talking, like, yep, that was another one that hit me. Like, how do we tell our kids our story? Do you guys know your own story? And how important it is for them to know that. I'm really good at telling my friends or sometimes the older kids in ministry, high schoolers that I minister, my story. But have I sat down and told my daughter, how I found Jesus? It's so, I mean, guys, that's your faith story. That's a great conversation starter. And it's pretty easy because you know your story the best. And obviously, I know some of your, I get some of this like, man, my kid's only 2. He's not going to get my story, right? But this is stuff you can store for later, and it's so big. So, yeah. Mm, yeah. Mm, yep. Right. Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about a little further than that. We need to let them understand they need to go to the Bible for all their answers, but also we're going to talk about our sticky faith team and the people that are surrounded by them. Maybe it's not just you, but it's their small group leader at church. Maybe it's someone in your small group. Maybe it's your parents that they're intentionally pouring into your kids too, and they could be that safe place for them to ask questions. That it's not all on us, but we need to make sure they know that there's other people available to have these conversations with as well. So yeah, keep going. I love this. It sounds like there's a lot you guys are, yeah, back there. Yeah, that's all the time. Yeah, yeah. Hey, how was your day today? Good. What'd you do at school today? Nothing. Anybody ever hear that? Every day. I'm like, okay, what's your favorite subject? What'd you have for lunch? I mean, you could tell me about your lunch at least. That's what I get all the time. But you can be creative, with that. There was either in the video or in the book I was reading with Sticky Faith, there's a mom who her kid didn't like to talk, but instead she knew that he liked movies. Was that in the video? Okay. And so just getting creative, I mean, you know your kids, you know what they like, their interests, and just really digging into those, even if you don't like what they like. All right, if you don't like comic books, well, maybe you get a comic book and still have that conversation with your kid. But yeah, I saw one more hand. A couple more. Let's go there first. Mm. Mm. processing. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Hmm. Yep. It's good. Did one more? I saw another hand. Yeah, Brian. Hmm. Hmm. I think the biggest thing is you have to ask yourself is, are you approachable? You know, are you approachable? Does your child feel comfortable enough to come tell you anything? And it kind of goes back to that, Jesus is bigger than any mistakes. And a lot of this, I bet, stems, are they comfortable coming to you based on how you react to them when they mess up? I think that's a large part of this, is building that trust when they mess up, that it's okay. Let's work through this together. It's not okay that you messed up, but let's work through it together. Talked about tricky subjects, right? Talked about sex and doubt. I was having a conversation, I think it was on Thursday. I don't think he's in here, but I had a dad come up to me and he says, "Man, thank you, Corey." I'm like, "For what?" He's like, "Well, you announced you're pregnant, so my daughter started to ask me how that happened. How you and your wife are pregnant." And I'm like, "Sorry?" He's like, "Well, I'm not ready for that." And I was like, "Well, sex is one of those things," and my wife is going to talk about this later. Sex is one of those things as parents we have to talk about, and we have to talk about early. And that's scary, I'm sure. We just had our conversation with Morgan, and it was probably a little too late. She's in 5th grade. We had it at the beginning of the summer. And it wasn't like, we had a really good book. We had a really good resource that we can share with you guys and just walk through some things. But they're either going to hear from you or they're going to hear it from school or their friends. And it's going to happen sooner than later. And so if we can teach them the healthy way of sex, how God designed it for marriage, and how God designed what sex is supposed to be like, don't you want that coming from you? I know it's a tricky subject. I know it's not fun. It's not comfortable. I think some parts when my wife was reading the book, I was in the corner giggling like a little kid. But it was important. And you know what? She sat there, we're like, "Do you have any questions?" And she's just like this. And no, she didn't. She didn't know what to say. But now the conversation's open. And if someone comes to her at school and says something like this, I believe now she's going to be able to feel comfortable coming to my wife and talking about, "Hey, I don't know what this is." Or, we just went to a conference. It's called the Orange Conference. It's where we get a lot of these resources, where we get our curriculum from. So our whole multi-site staff, youth staff, went there. And they talk about how important it is to start telling your kids what their proper body parts is. There's another good book out there. I can give you guys the title for that later. How you're supposed to teach these kids what these body parts are and just not make up these fake names, because then they're not really going to understand it. And so 5,000 Christians, pastors, senior pastors, youth pastors, children's pastors. This is going to go on video, so this is really awkward. But he had us all stand up and yell out "penis." 5,000 of us. Awkward. And then he says, "All right, now let's all say vagina." Like, are we in a church conference here? Like, what is going on? And so we're yelling this out. Penis, penis, vagina, vagina. Why? Why does that? Because it makes us uncomfortable. But we have to start getting comfortable with those terms so we can explain to our kids and not make it a tricky subject, but really be upfront with them. All right? And that's what I learned this last year. And so we're like, man, we have to have conversations so our kids feel comfortable with us, so they can come to us and the worst, and their highs and their lows. So anyway, that was way off track. Sorry. Anybody else from the video on having conversation? Yeah, Kim. Yeah. Yeah, I love that too. And I think he said, I want my kids to be parents. I want my kids to want to be parents like I was or something like that. I just thought that was key. Like, looking at how I parent, I want Morgan to learn from that. And I want her to desire to be better than what I am. I hope she's learning from me and learning from my mistakes, but I pray that she's learning to put Christ first. And when she's in that point as a parent, that she's intentionally raising up her children too. So a lot of good stuff in this. And like I said, if this book is still for sale in the bookstore, a lot of this comes from this. So like as I was reading, I was like, man, that was straight from the video, straight from her mouth. But it goes a little bit further in here. So a couple things she said: provide space and time for quality conversations. She talked about pal time. Did she talk about that in the video? This was huge. This kind of comes together about our camp experience at Camp Paradise. She called it pal time. Like, she set this up intentionally every week, either one-on-one with her husband would take her daughter, and she would take her son, and they would call it pal time, and they would just go for ice cream for an hour a week, and they would know that they can count on that time, and they can go shoot hoops. They could, just have that intentional time every single week, provide space and time for quality conversations, learn and listen to ask questions, not lecture. We talked about that. Create the right venue for meaningful conversation. So sometimes that's the car, right? The car is a great place to have meaningful conversations. We spend so much time in there. So just know that. Don't avoid touchy subjects. We talked about that. Get creative if your kid doesn't want to talk with you. Talk about the movie theater idea and share your faith story with your kids and be honest. Be honest with them. So that is what Sticky Faith Conversations is all about. And I know we can all learn something from that. And whatever stage we are in our parenting, there's stuff we can take away and just get ready for. And so we're going to move on to, real quick, I need to get my time out. Hey, Jamie, real quick, will you check and see where we're at in the service and see if they're in worship? That way I don't miss announcements. That would be bad. I missed practice this morning and got the look. So two things we're going to talk about for intentional parenting, which I said it goes right along with what we're doing here. The first one is consistent presence. All right, consistent presence. Intentional parents make sacrifices in order to be consistently present. In order for you guys to be present for your children, parents, you guys have to make sacrifices so that you can be there as often as possible, okay? In order to be present for your children, you're going to have to make sacrifices. And some of you are like, I know what sacrifice is all about, right? But presence doesn't just happen. It doesn't. It requires intentional actions. When you guys say yes to something outside of your family, whether that's yes to your job, whether that's yes to the fantasy football draft, whether that's yes to hanging out with some of your friends, you're saying no to your kids and to your family. And so you have to really think about those yeses, because those are the ones that take you away from your family. Obviously, you have to work. You have to provide for your kids. You deserve some time away in fantasy football drafts. Like, I'm excited for mine. But maybe schedule them on times where it doesn't take away from your time with your family, okay? Maybe you're too involved at church. Maybe that's your yes right now, and you need to kind of, it's kind of taken away from my kids. So just know that. Could be that too. Where are we at, Jamie? Sweet. We got lots of time then. All right. Intentional parent doesn't use hope as a primary parenting strategy. I hope that my kids spend enough time with me. I hope that through our time that was good enough. I hope that my presence was good enough. So we can't use hope as a parenting strategy. We have to believe and understand that our time is so valuable. Our presence is so important. Doug Field says this: an exception to this is a single parent. If you're a struggling single parent doing everything you can to put food on the table, you are heroic. And I believe that. I believe you're heroic. And, as a pastor, as a children's pastor, I see this, and I don't know if we value that enough, that what you guys are doing, the way that you hold things together. But I believe, that God's going to credit you guys for all your hard work, for the time that you put in to provide for them. And I know it's not easy, especially if you have multiple kids. So if you're a single parent in here, it's the church's job to come around you with people. I'm not talking about just like the Crossings job. I'm saying it's your job as a church too, as parents, to come around these parents. It's my job to come around these parents and to help them out. So an intentional parent recognizes that kids need their presence more than their presence their work affords. All right, so we understand that they need our presence way more than they need the physical stuff that our work provides. So just knowing that was a hard one for me to hear. And then also, this is another thing Katie's going to hit. I keep saying, man, Katie's going to hit. This last week, Katie's going to hit a lot on technology, right? We need to remove the digital leash on our family. And this is the hardest one for me. Still, we went to camp, and we were able to turn our phones off for 4 days. It's the best 4 days of my life. Didn't have to look at my phone. Didn't have to do anything on Facebook. Didn't have any text messages. Didn't have any phone calls. I was able to spend uninterrupted time with my daughter. And you get back in the world, and it's like, woo, plug back in. I got that's going on. It was so bad. Like yesterday, I needed as I'm writing this course and I'm reading this and writing this stuff, here's what I'm going through, right? I needed a day just relax. Like I've been just going on this construction project. I needed to just watch TV for a little bit. And my daughter came in. She's like, Daddy, I want to do something. I'm like, I don't want to do anything right now. So here's what I did. I said, go get your makeup. And as I'm watching TV, you can do a makeover on me. That's how low I got. I didn't want to do anything. But it did make her happy, so that was good. And I was still talking with her during it, but I still had my, except when she said, close your eyes, but I looked terrible, all right? Terrible. There's pictures on Snapchat, but I do have it on my phone. But anyway, that's not an excuse. Like, that was bad of me. And I had to ask for forgiveness for that one. And even to her, I had to say, man, I messed up. I felt like I needed that, and that wasn't the way. So I'm guilty of this. We just need to make sure we remove these and set up proper boundaries and that they understand that we are present with them. We're present with them. So the last one is a peaceful home. Peaceful home. Intentional parents create a shelter from the storm. A peaceful home is a safe home. A safe home. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a quiet home. It doesn't mean that it's always just going to be like angels singing. But it does include that discipline without screaming and yelling. A peaceful home includes boundaries, but not too many rules. A peaceful home includes an environment that is welcoming to their friends. If you're constantly saying, no, your friends can't come over here, no, your friends can't come over here, or like my dad, when I was a kid, my dad would walk around in his whitey-tighties. That's not welcoming to your friends. All right? They still came. I don't know why. We laughed every time. But anyway, welcome to your friends. A quiet home is warm and consistent affection. We talked about that last week. Have consistent affection. It includes parents who express love for one another. If you're married, express that love for one another. Let them know that this marriage is for real and that your marriage is the priority. It's also a place where freedom from being compared to other siblings. So we talked about that a little bit. You can't compare your siblings, your kids to one another. They're individuals. They all have different needs. It's a place for kids to be themselves, and it's a shame-free environment. Children need to be accepted by their parents. And you may be like, duh, I know that. But you know what? Sometimes we're not very good at that. It builds confidence for them and allows them to take risk at things they're really good at and find success. In order to be a peace-filled home, you have to be a peace-filled person. And we talked a little bit about this. Peace, the word peace is in the Bible, it's translated as absence of war. We have to understand we are not at war with God. We're not at war with our kids, and we're not at war with ourselves. We have to understand that only Jesus brings us peace in our relationship with him. Colossians 1:20 says, and through him, Jesus, God reconciled everything to himself. He, God, made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by the means of Christ's blood on the cross. That should be our primary teaching. To create a peaceful home, we have to be a peaceful person because of Jesus. We have to know it's all about him. And that's when we give our kids that peaceful home, okay? So peaceful home, consistent presence are the two things today. We're going to wrap up right now. I'm going to let Jamie take over in just a little bit. I know he just went and looked for time for me again. Here's what we're going to do for the last couple minutes. I'll let you guys break up with your spouse if they're here. If they're not here, you can just grab somebody. If you see someone by themselves, you can just kind of wrap with them. Answer those questions first by yourselves, and if you want to discuss that with a smaller group, I'd love for you guys to do that. As you leave, I do have one more. Hopefully that was a mistake. I do have one more homework assignment. They're very easy. It just kind of goes over the present test and the Peaceful Home test, so make sure you guys grab that on your way out. And then we're going to be on week 4 next week, okay? So big week. Take some of those notes home. If your spouse is not here, talk to them about it. Don't just make this a conversation today. Talk about it throughout the week. How can you put some of this stuff in action today, all right, or in a year or two? So yeah, break up with your spouse. Appreciate you guys doing. After you have time talking with each other, you guys are free to go, and we'll see you guys next week, okay? All right. Thank you, guys.